Hi, Chris here. I'm an airbrush newbie. I've really only just started. I've been using airbrushes for quite some time, but just literally as a replacement for spray cans, making props for theatre work and stuff. Never really using it as a proper airbrush. And while we're locked down here, this is May 2020, I thought, right, I'll start using it as a proper airbrush. And I consider myself to be a newbie. Okay, so a newbie to an airbrush, but I've been an engineer for a very long time. And one of the things I've learnt about Chinese goods is that if you consider them to be a kit of parts that's been assembled, maybe not as well as it could have been, then you can't go wrong. I've got a milling machine, I've got lathes, I've got all sorts of stuff, all Chinese, and they're all very good. No, I've got no complaints. And I think the same applies to these airbrushes. I know the German ones are excellent quality, and they're hideously expensive as well. This is not a war. I don't want to start a war here. They're probably worth the money. In fact, believe it or not, I've ordered one, so I will find out. But if we take a reasonably priced airbrush like this is a KK Moon. Never heard of them before, and you don't see much of them, you know, when people are talking about them. But this was £35. This is May 2020 on Amazon, and I have to say I'm quite impressed with the build quality of this thing. I've looked at it, taken it to bits, and examined it, and it's quite reasonable, and certainly for £35, it's good. I can't comment on the quality of the work that it produces because, as I say, I'm a newbie. But I have found it can produce very nice, clean, straight lines with no splattering and such like. But there's room for improvement. So the first thing I did was take it to bits to have a look at it. And one of the things that stood out instantly was the needle. Possibly the most important part of the airbrush is the needle. Let me see if I can come down on this and focus on it. Okay. The needle should be absolutely spot on perfect. Any problems with the needle, and you're not going to get a good spray. I mean, that I know as an engineer. So running my fingers down it, I could feel it should be smooth as butter. It should be like glass. And it wasn't. It was ever so slightly rough. So what I did was I took some 1500 grit emery paper and I just gently run it down the length of the needle. Now you've got to be damn careful here because these needles are extremely sharp. So make sure that when you're running your thing down it, best not to take it to the very end. Just, off the camera, just do it as near as possible to the end, and be very careful because the end is extremely delicate, and just do that a few times until you feel it smoother. And then what I did was I took some diamond paste. Now this stuff's quite cheap to buy. This was I think it's the equivalent of 3000 grit or something, and you take a very small blob of this, just a little bit, and then rub it up and down. So I keep this in focus. Just rub it up and down and smooth it. And then if you go in one direction towards the point and just take your hands off when you get there, you're not going to stab yourself because, as I say, these are sharp. They're very, very sharp. I accidentally stabbed myself, and to be honest with you, I didn't feel it to begin with. It was that sharp. But after you've done that a few times, okay, clean it off, and it should now feel very, very smooth, almost like glass. Okay, now I'm just going to pause a moment while I clean my hands because my hands are actually covered in diamond grit at the moment. Okay, so I've cleaned off the diamond grit. So having cleaned the needle, okay, so I might as well zoom back out again because we really don't need to see this. Okay, so having cleaned the needle very, very carefully, and the way I do it is to put my finger right on the very tip of it and then very gently line it up with the hole, because it's ever so easy to break it. And then you push down on the trigger and you push it through, and it should come out at the other end if you've done that right. And you should just be able to see very, very thin at the end, the point of the needle. And then you can stick the end back on, the end cap back on again. And wearing gloves makes things very difficult. Okay. So now that needle has now been smoothed out and is going to improve the flow of the ink. And believe me, when I did it, there was a dramatic improvement. And once again, as I say, I'm new to this game, so I can't compare it with a really expensive one. But what I found was that if I held my hand steady and went along a sheet of paper, with the tip off, incidentally, because you get very fine lines if you go with the tip off right to the paper, the lines were smooth, unbroken, and very, very constant width, which is one of the criticisms I've heard levelled against these things, right? So, incidentally, a good tip, when you're putting anything back on the end, always pull back on the lever so you withdraw the needle. Otherwise, it's very easy to get these slightly out and bend the needle, and that's something you don't want. Okay. Now, the other thing I did, taking these things to bits is very scary at first, because when I first took it to bits and the thing fell apart, I thought, oh my God, I've just wrecked it. But in fact, you get very used to it, and it's quite easy. This piece in the barrel unscrews. This has got a tension spring, which effectively puts the tension on the trigger. So you can make it very hard or very soft as the way you pull the trigger back. Okay. So let me just take the needle out. Okay. So if you take this out, okay, once again, what you've got here is a very narrow gap. Let me zoom in for you. You can see this. Hopefully it's in focus. You've got a little bar, little pin that goes through, and a gap. And the gap is what goes around the trigger mechanism. Okay. And what I found was that it was rough. It hadn't been finished. Now, this is probably one of the big benefits of the very expensive units. When they produce them, somebody then goes along and finishes. Now, if you do the finishing yourself, you do improve the quality of these cheaper units. So what I did was I took a file, a diamond file, and these are not expensive, they're quite cheap, and I just gently filed in that gap. You have to take the pin out. That has to be removed in order to get the pin in there, to get the file in there rather. So just gently file in there and take out all the rough stuff. And it's just basically, they cut it, and they probably did a reasonably good job of cutting it, but afterwards they didn't bother to clean it up. So you've got rough edges, and those rough edges, when you're squeezing the trigger and pulling back, they're like little humps that you've got to go over, and instead of the trigger smoothly pulling back, it pulls back in stages each time it goes over one of those little humps. Okay, so having filed that smooth, okay, put the pin back in and reinsert, and you shall find that it works a lot better. I'm going to have to pause once again because you don't want to see me fiddling around, because with gloves on it's really hard to put that pin back in, but it's actually quite easy. Okay, I put the pin back in. Right, so what we'll do now is we'll reassemble. Let me zoom back out so we can see. And to reassemble, you really have to do one thing, and that's put this in. On this particular model, it goes in to begin with sideways because of that pin. Okay, and then you'll find there's like two slots in the side which it goes down, and I cannot show you them, but you'll see them on your own if you have a similar type of airbrush. What they're doing is they're pressing down on the air release valve underneath. So these are dual action airbrushes, and when you press down you let the air out, and when you pull back you let the paint mixture flow in. So that should go across there, and then take a very fine oiler. I've just used a hypodermic needle, and it allows you to very precisely apply oil. Just a couple of gentle drops on either side. And that makes it a lot easier to push that down. Okay. Once you've got it in position, this goes back in. The little thin piece at the top slides in the hole there. The spring goes on, and then the tension nut goes in here, and that hole screws back in. And if it's been done correctly, this should not come out, and if it's been done incorrectly, this will come out. And as you can see, it's coming out, and the reason for that is I didn't press it down far enough. No big deal. Let's take it out again. Put that back. Insert the needle very gently, very carefully. That should go through there, and that's secured. Tighten the back cap, tighten the tensioner up. I like it fully tightened in because I haven't really got much of a finesse in my touch as yet, being a newbie, so I like it to be quite positive when it comes back. And what that's done, that filing and lubricating, has made this so much smoother now. It pulls back very gently. There is still a couple of little clicks, but as I say, this is a fairly cheap airbrush, and there is a limit to how much you can improve it. Okay, stick the cap back on the back. So these are just a few tips that I've found so far, basically based on my own experience as an engineer of how you can improve the quality of a fairly cheap airbrush. And I hope this has helped some of the newbies as they're just starting out. And if you've got this particular type of airbrush, this KK Moon, I'd be interested to hear what your comments are on it. I'm actually quite impressed. The build quality, I mean, £35 is very cheap for an airbrush, especially when you can see them, we go for up to £230, £240. And as I said, I've ordered a Harder Steenbeck one, so we'll find out what the difference is when that arrives, probably on Saturday. But I don't expect it will improve the quality of my work tremendously. I mean, as I say, being a newbie, I have a lot to learn. But it would be interesting to see the exact difference between that and a £35 one. So I'll report back with the differences when I've actually had a chance to play with it. Anyway, I hope you find this interesting, and I will post another one when I've got more information. Take care. Bye-bye.